Yeah, probably at 8:30.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
I make a motion that we accept Mary Hildebrand's resignation from the Stafford Township Treasurer position effective July 19th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
I make a motion that we approve Gemma Austin's appointment as the Stafford Township Treasurer effective July 19th, 22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Where's Mikey?
He is going to be running just a little bit late. He got away late. He's having a bad morning.
I guess we'll recess for a while.
Hey guys, my apologies, it's
No,
been
you're
a
fine.
crazy morning.
No problem.
Had to borrow a colleague's printer this morning. How are we all doing?
Pretty good.
Good, good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is kind of a wrap of where you've gone, where you've been this year, as well as just talk a little bit about where to go this upcoming year, and discuss what we want to look at and do. So, as you all know, you've got a couple of plans, your medical and dental plan that is self-funded. It's been self-funded for 24 years, somewhere around there. You have a reserve that's pretty healthy right now, that we'll talk a little bit more about it here in just a little bit. This first page is your medical utilization. This is through the first 6 months of the year. You will see that if we go across the top, it talks about your funding, your levels. One thing always to remember, you pay the first $45,000 on each individual, up to the first $45,000. Then you have this little one-time deductible called an aggregate deductible of $50,000. And we put that, just as a reminder, we put that in place because it gives you pay a premium every year for coverage over $45,000. And we can reduce that premium by $50,000 if you agree to pay the first $50,000 if somebody goes over, okay? And that's a one-time deductible. It's not on everybody. It's just a one-time collective if you have 3 or 4 people go over. So we've got that in place, and then you have kind of a ceiling on claims called that minimum attachment point, which is 629. So you've got 2 types of protection on your plan. You've got individual protection, and you've got an umbrella over the entire group if the world fell apart and we had 15 people spend $45,000. You've got a ceiling. So that's the good news. You've got protection 2 different ways. And those numbers, they set those, the reinsurance carrier sets those factors at the very top. And then based off of those factors in your enrollment, you can see that so far you've got about $264,000 in that monthly attachment point that has been set aside for claims this year so far on the medical plan. Any questions on that? Okay, so keep that 264 in mind. And so far you can see from a claims perspective, we've spent in the first column at the bottom left, medical claims paid, about $652,000 that have gone through the plan this year. On pharmacy claims, about $56,000. So that gives you a total about 709. And so out of that 709, we then have to determine how much was paid by the county, how much was paid by reinsurance, those kind of things. So as we go across that aggregate deductible, that means we had somebody who spent their $45,000 this year. So you did go over, you did spend that $50,000 already this year. So that's that one-time deductible that's gone. If somebody else hits the 45, we're good to go. Over specific, that is what, once you paid the 45, you paid the 50, that is what you've gotten into the reinsurance pockets for this year so far is $11,000 in the overspec column. That's on an individual basis, and we'll talk about that large claim situation here in a second. And if you recall from last year, in the next column, we had an individual that wasn't approved at the 45,000. And there was some significant things going on, and so we could have done one of two things. We could have either take that risk from the underwriter and put it into your premiums, where you know you would have paid that for 12 months, an extra $300 and some thousand in premiums, or they do what's called an increase specific or a laser on that individual. And so if it happens, you pay for it. And when we talked about that last year, we were reserving, because you do have a nice reserve, we were like, and that's what it's there for. Your reserve is there for rocky situations. And then we just set aside, said, hey, we will earmark some reserves to pay that if that happens, okay? So when you look at that column, you can see that you actually spent more than, okay, so the first 45,000 is in your claims, these net paid claims, but then you had another, you didn't get to $400,000, you spent about $100,000 of that, because the laser's not actually an additional 400, it's an additional 355 plus that 45,000 gets you to the 400. Okay, so the 345 more you could have spent, you spent 100. And so, but those are dollars you did spend in that regard. So, and then paid under prior spec contract, that column there is the reinsurance carrier. So last year, the reinsurance carrier had claims that occurred and paid, or incurred last year, but they were paid in the first 3 months of this year, and you can see 17,237 reinsurance carrier paid that. You guys did not pay that. So when you look at that, then you have a few of these little outside contract, that is just like case management, and is one of the things that you have to pay for that's not included. The reinsurance carrier doesn't include that. It's about $1,500. So going across here, you paid the aggregate deductible, you paid the over specific, oh, I'm sorry, not the over, that laser column, and then you paid the outside contract and the net paid claims. So when you put all of those together, you had about 152 on top of that 291. So far this year, you spent about 443 on claims.
This came out of our reserve.
Yeah, so you've gone into your reserve. You were over 1.8 and you're at 1.7 on your reserves right now, is where it is. So about 100 and, you're about 100 and,
But that's what our reserves are for, isn't it?
it is,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we've only dipped into our reserves about just a little over 100,000. Okay.
Yep. And of course, unfortunately, that situation that we're talking about in that middle column there is no longer on the plan. So the first, where we look at from a reinsurance standpoint, because I talked about that umbrella over the entire group, right? That's that 264 number right there at the very top. Right now, what counts towards that is that 291,000. So right now, you pay those claims, and at the end of the year, if we're upside down, the reinsurance carrier reimburses you those dollars. So like if it stopped right now, you would get back roughly $28,000. Because we had 264 was your monthly attachment point, and you spent 291. Now, there are a couple things. They'll do an audit, and one of those things is you get back prescription rebates from your prescription benefit manager every quarter. You guys get those, and they would subtract that from those dollars that you were owed back, because that is something that you never, it's like, when you get those rebates back, it's like you never paid them. And so they don't include those. And then they'll do an audit and they'll just say, you know, we'll go through, were all the claims eligible and this and that. But roughly you would have got back 28,000 minus your rebates that you received for this year. So, so it's been a rough first start to the year compared to the year. What that tells me right now, if it continues on, what will happen is, I don't think that we will see a huge increase on your fixed cost, maybe from your incumbent, because your incumbent was hit pretty hard last year. If you turn the page, you can see that the incumbent last year was hit for 271 in the 12 months last year, that over spec column on page 2 at the bottom. They were hit for 271 plus back here on page 1, the 255. So they were hit for $550-some thousand last year in total. This year so far, they've been hit for $11,000, which is good, but what that will happen is they'll probably come back and want to because they look at 3 years of
Yeah,
data.
that's what I was getting ready to ask, if they take a rolling average of several years.
They do, and it's really weighted.
Because some years, 11 is real good, last year was real bad.
Right,
They
so
should average
they'll
it
give
out.
more weight to this year. It's usually about a 70-20-10 or 60-30-10 split for the last 3 years, how they weight that for credibility purposes. So last year will still factor in. But the thing is what's good about the way you have it set up is that we can go to the market on the stop loss, and we've done that in the past. And if this carrier wants to hiccup and say, hey, we need a 30% rate increase, we can move. And it doesn't affect your employees, it doesn't affect you. We've been with the same carrier, I think this is the 3rd year we've been with this carrier. And you like to have some longevity with those and not hop around. The carriers see that when we go out to quote, they'll see you were with the same carrier for the last 3 years, and so they'll say, well, maybe they'll be with us and they'll give us some better rates and stuff too. So, but that, I don't see the fixed cost being an issue. Where I see the cost is that attachment point that you could spend. It came down last year. We brought it down. If you see on page 1 up here, it says 629, and on page 2 it says 647. So we came down a little bit last year. Because we're above that right now through 6 months, if that doesn't change, that number could go up, because it's based off of they'll look at your experience again, and they always try to put that number about 25% above, or 125% of what they think you're going to spend. And if now
Since we've already hit it, they're gonna wanna raise it.
they're gonna wanna raise that. But again, that doesn't mean you have to fund to that. That's just your worst case scenario. So if we get a $100,000 increase on that, we can also always leave the rates exactly as they are, earmark whatever that increase is out of reserves and see, because it's truly self-funding, and that's why you have your reserves, is that it does this. I always tell people, you have 1 year so darn good you can't believe it, you have 1 so bad you can't believe it, and you have 3 average years where you save more than what if you would have been fully insured. But that would be my only concern on the medical renewal, is that number there, when we come back here in September, October, that number's going to probably increase, unless July, August, September claims go down, which they very well could. Because a lot of your claims were early this year. Your large claim, and I gave somebody my copy that had a name on it, so I apologize. But you've had one individual, like I mentioned, and this was clear back early in the year, that's on page 3, that had, it was a dependent that had some ongoing issues. There was some COVID situation, ended up causing some other things, respiratory wise. In there, but that seems to be a one-time thing. You can see he spent about $105,000. That's at That spent the 45 and the 50 aggregating specific on the first page. And then the other person doesn't show up on here because this is a 50% report, and theirs was 400,000, so 50% would be 200, and they didn't spend that, so they don't show up on here.
I don't see the 100, oh,
Go right in the
Thank you.
middle, at the top,
right here.
keep going, nope, to the right and up. If you look at their paid year to date,
Okay, yep,
it says, that's what it is, and it says over spec
okay.
is where that's at.
So this was one individual here,
Yep,
okay,
that was one,
okay.
yep. And that was, I believe, clear back in January. And there's nothing really on, I mean, if you look at yeah, it was back in January for the most part. If you look at the last dates of service over here on the far right, you can see that most of that was back in middle of January. So that's not an ongoing, so again, going back to right now, based off of what we're looking at, I don't foresee, unless something else changes, an increase specific on anybody, like we had this year. And I think that we can leverage how your group's doing with the other carriers if your carrier helps. So, the next page, the fourth page, this is just your dental, just to show you where you're at right now in the current year. Again, we're not talking about significant dollars here. You're upside down about $1,300 on this, and that, again, dental's so predictable. It'll be 1 year, like last year, if you look at the last page, you paid about $1,600 more than what we actually funded for last year, and you're about 13, and that'll end up
Dental
being-
can't even get bad enough to really hurt us with our size of reserve.
Right, and you have, and here's the thing with the dental plan, is right now, you could go find a fully insured dental plan, but a lot of the dentists have quit participating in networks and stuff like that, and so you have a plan right now that's called an indemnity plan. People can go to any dentist they wanna go to, and your plan pays at the, what they call 90 percentile of usual and customary. So if I go to dentist XYZ and they charge me $100 for cleaning, and that's within that 90th percentile, they're gonna pay for that dental service like that. Now, if somebody charges 150 when it should have been 100, then there's a chance that your member will be, might have to pay a little bit out of pocket. But they don't have to worry about a network. Usually those networks give a very minimum discount anyways, and you're paying profits to a carrier, and we're not talking about a lot of dollars. So, but I will guarantee you that both plans are very good paying plans. I mean, they are extremely, I don't wanna say, yeah, well, they're rich plans, or the medical plan is definitely a rich plan.
So this, on this factors, this family, that's what a family plan costs us.
That's claims. That's claims only.
Okay.
Okay, you will
I
have
think he's
fixed
right
costs.
here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
on.
That's just claims only. That's what the county sets aside right now for claims for the family. And that's what for each person here for claims. Now, you have the fixed cost as well, and I didn't bring that with me, but there's when we come to renewal, there's a sheet that shows, okay, we set aside, there's a total rate for the family. And part of that is claims, and part of that is the fixed cost. That's the premium and the administration fees that you pay on an annual basis to run the plan. And so, when we come back next time, that's what we'll have. We'll have that sheet that shows you what the rates are for those. Now, one thing that I've always, in the past, mentioned is that you guys are under 50 employees. So you kind of have the best of both worlds right now, because if you're under 50, the Affordable Care Act back in 2011, 2012 says that an insurance carrier has to take you without even looking at any of your experience whatsoever. It's just based off of a census. You give them the census, they look at it, and they say, okay, based off it, because it's all age rated. It's not medically rated. So if ever the world fell apart on you, and all of a sudden, let's say, because there are $1 million drugs out there nowadays, if you had somebody that started taking $1 million drug, we can then all of a sudden just flip over to one of those fully insured plans and they can't take that $1 million direct into consideration. They can't take it into consideration. You're in a big pool with everybody else your size in the state of Kansas, and you just go with the flow. Now, we can always look at those plans right now just to do a comparative analysis on your plan, which we haven't done that probably in 3 years. I think about 3 years ago, we did that with Blue Cross. We had them do a proposal, and it's probably good to look at that about every 3 years, just to see. And so, I mean, that would be my suggestion is look at a Blue Cross plan versus your current plan. There are other options. There's United Healthcare, there's Aetna. We can get them involved as well if you want to, just to see in comparison. It'll be really difficult to get a plan as good as yours, a medical plan as good as yours, because right now this is your plan, you build it, you control the deductibles, co-insurance. Once you go to Blue Cross, they're canned plans, right? You won't have the out-of-pockets, the low out-of-pockets like you have now. They'll be higher because those canned plans are now extreme. I mean, you're probably talking $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 out of pocket, but we can still do a comparative analysis if you all would like to see
I
that.
think as a whole, our employees like our plan, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
We have a good plan.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's just some of the younger ones, when you're trying to hire, they look at what you pay per hour, but they really don't look at the good health insurance, because when you're young, you don't need health insurance.
absolutely. It's a huge balancing act in that regard, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are some employers that have gone to paying a stipend if somebody didn't want to have your insurance. But they have, and usually to do that, there's some rules that you want to make sure you follow, like they have to show proof that they have coverage elsewhere.
Yeah, that would
or
be my
something.
concern, is that you would take a stipend and then not, be young and not wise and not do anything, and then that's not good for employee longevity.
Yeah,
To not
absolutely.
have any insurance,
Yeah. Well, some of those young folks, they don't care also because they can be on their parents' plan until 26 now too, right?
Mhm.
And so they don't want the insurance, don't need it. That would be one of the issues one of the things that possibly could help you if you said, you know what, if you don't want to be on it, we'll give you X amount of dollars a month on your paycheck, but you've got to show that you have proof. Because some of those people take yours and they're probably still on their parents as well, if they're under
Yeah.
26. Not always, but,
Mhm.
so that'd be something to think about, a policy like that to maybe help a
Yeah,
little bit.
a stipend with a requirement to show proof that you have insurance wouldn't be a terrible idea.
Yeah, would they have to do that on a monthly basis, show that they have?
Usually it's done on an annual, some of the groups that I've worked with, some of them have done it twice a year, that they've got to show that proof twice a year. The problem is with the twice a year is that they have to have a qualifying event to come back onto your plan. So basically, let's say January 1, so-and-so shows proof they're covered, they drop their insurance three months later, whatever they're at, and they drop it on their own. That's not a qualified event that will allow them to come back on your plan. And so you could stop paying them the stipend, but you couldn't allow them to come back on their plan. Now, if they turn 26 during that year and lose that coverage, that's a qualifying event where you could quit paying them their stipend and then require them to come onto your plan at that point. There's just some caveats that you have to be careful with on that.
Yeah.
But I've seen it be pretty successful. The only other thing that I have a concern with is sometimes then you start getting healthy folks that maybe not take your plan, and it leaves you with all the sick folks on the plan, and then over time, all of a sudden, your plan's just completely out of control, and everybody else all the healthy people have gone to their spouse's plans and taken the stipend.
Yeah.
And that can affect you as well over time, so you gotta be careful on how you do that as well. But if you can, just think about it right here, if you can get, on an employee spouse, that's $1,250 that you're setting aside for funding right now. If the spouse right now, there's no reason for a spouse to take they're probably their own plan, because your plan's so rich, plus it's very, very affordable for the members. And so they're probably not taking that plan because of that, so now you got a spouse on your plan that potentially spent $105,000. So it might be been a good thing in that scenario to have a, you know, set it up where, you know, for an employee, it's X amount of dollars if you're not on it, and if your spouse isn't on it, might have something else in that regard. I don't know, could end up spending, the problem is you could end up spending more, right?
Yeah.
You might have a spouse that is on that other plan, and now all of a sudden you've got to pay a stipend to that employee for not putting them on your plan. And you haven't been, too, so it's a slippery slope in that regard. So what number one, what we use this meeting for a lot of times, do you want to make any changes to your plan? We can bring back some benchmarking to discuss. You know, I'll tell you right now, your plan's very rich, but you use that to counterbalance wages and everything as well.
So what is the deductible on our employees, like copay or whatever?
750, 1,500.
$750 is the deductible, and then I think the co-insurance is another $1,000, isn't
I
it?
think so.
I think it's a total of $1,750 out of pocket, isn't it? Or is it?
I was thinking 15, but maybe not.
The total out of pocket's right around $2,000
Yeah.
Okay.
is what it is for your plan right now. And probably the average out there, if we looked at the municipalities across the state, would be closer to probably $300 to $3,500 in that regard. Now, as we go west, the plans are a lot better than if we're going east from here. So I would say you guys are more in line with the other counties out this direction. But overall, across the state, your plan's probably a little bit less, or has less out of pocket. But so we can look at some benchmarking, and that'd be something I could bring back to you, just to show you where you're at in comparative to other municipalities on out of pockets. And you can make a decision, do we want to increase it, do we want to leave it the same in those regards? And then, would you like to see a comparative fully insured, just to?
See, that's gonna be a huge deductible though on our people. Like you could have a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 deductible, right?
You could,
If you
we
went to
can,
the
but we can go to Blue
Blue
Cross. We can go to Blue Cross and say, I think they still have a $1,000 or a $1,500 deductible, but the out-of-pocket, the co-insurance will probably be another couple thousand. I mean, so you'd be looking at, instead of $2,000 out of pocket, you'd be looking at probably, their best plan is probably gonna be somewhere around $3,000. I would imagine right around there. So not a huge increase, so we'd still be able to see comparatively that, you've got, from a rate perspective, looking at your plan versus what you could be having out there. And it gives you a peace of mind that says, yeah, we're funding, because right now I think you're funding about $2,500 on a family overall. And I apologize, I should have brought that with me, what that was, and so if we look at
That's this 17 plus the fixed.
correct. It's 24, 25, I think right around there is what you're paying. And I would say that the fully insured is probably gonna be right in that ballpark.
So if you have family insurance, we're funding at 25, let's just say 2,400 a month, correct?
Yeah.
So if
Somewhere
you're
right
working
around there.
160 hours a month, that's $15 an hour. If you have family insurance. Right,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I can't remember what you
I-
charge for the.
I mean, I guess,
Family is $250 a month and
yeah, so
40
you're
for
taking
them.
that off the top.
Yeah, you would take that off.
$250?
So 20,
The employee pays $250 a month?
2150 is
Yes, and then
really what
40
we
if they have a
have
family
in
dinner.
it.
And then
So
what's like the single?
I'm gonna print out for you guys here.
I guess my opinion on it is I'm happy with what we've got going. If you feel that would be advantageous for us to look at it, then we can. If we haven't done it in 3 years,
Well,
I think our people are happy.
How much are we paying total a year, county paying?
well, it's a moving target, right? Because you have a self-funded plan.
Yeah,
So even though it's what you're funding versus what you actually spend in a year, right? Because that's how you got your reserves, because even though,
if you don't count what we're taking out of reserves, I mean, how much do we pay? Do we pay to put money into the reserve? I mean, is it 1 million or more than that, or?
yeah, it's right, I mean, it's, when we take into account the dental plan and the medical prescription, it was, and I just looked at that yesterday, it's right, I mean, I think last year was a little under $1 million, is what it was. I'll send that back, I'll send exactly what that is, it would've been what
This
we,
is gonna show you what the employee pays, this is the plan, this is the county share, and then this is what we throw into reserve. And then down here at the bottom, it'll give you totals. And I'll print more copies here for you guys to look at.
I think it'd be good to get some comparison, just
I
for.
mean, I think
our
people like
information.
Blue Cross in general. It's just that I have friends that are on Blue Cross personally, and it seems like they gripe about how high the premiums are and their deductibles high also.
yeah.
And that's the biggest
Yeah.
gripe that I hear about Blue Cross, but
Yeah, the only,
it is
I'm
excellent.
not
I
saying
mean,
you
it's excellent
change.
insurance.
No.
That's not what I'm saying,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's a piece of, I mean,
It's
it's
just
just looking at it to say, okay,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
just
what
our
we're funding.
responsibility to look at options instead of blindly just.
I think it's a
renewing.
reality check,
Yeah,
and I'd also like to see United Healthcare.
okay.
I think we talked to one of the commissioners from another county that had Blue Cross, and I'm thinking they said they were paying like
It
over
was-
2 million.
Yeah,
And they're
it was-
about our same size. So they're paying at least twice as much.
It would make you feel really good about our self-funded plan. I mean, it's expensive and we're investing a lot in it, but if Blue Cross or United came in way higher, you'd
Yeah.
get that warm fuzzy feeling inside.
Well, I don't,
Well,
I mean,
well,
the self-funded plans are typically always going to be 10 to 15, well, I don't want to say that. If we were comparing apples to apples, because if we were comparing a plan that is medically rated with the carrier versus, because your plan is based off of your medical conditions, if we were comparing apples to apples, typically a self-funded plan is going to be 10 to 15% higher in risk because you get the rewards, right? That's how you build your reserves over the years. But if we're talking about the age-rated plans, which is what you would be because you're under 50 and not taking into medical considerations versus your plan now, that's what we're looking at. And I don't have an idea of where you would be because it's based off of ages and I'd have to, we'd have to run that just to see. But I do think that you have, it's kind of changing a little bit over the last few years, but you still have an average age is higher.
That's what I was getting ready to
It's gonna be
say.
a
The only benefit I guess I would see to a potential change, it would be that we have an average higher age workforce. And that the last 15 years, probably statistically speaking, would be better than our next 15 years, just based on our average, statistics of aging employees.
Sure, absolutely.
And-
But
and
it's
they're-
also
and
gonna
they're-
cost you more on that other
Yeah.
plan because those older
Because
people,
of
they're gonna.
the age.
Yeah, if you hire a 21-year-old employee only, the cost might be $400, but if you have a 60-year-old, that person you might be paying $1,300 for that one individual. Because that's how the age rated is based, literally, if you have, the age rate, if you have an employee that has a spouse and 4 dependents on the plan, you're gonna pay a premium for each one of those individuals on that plan. And the kids might each be $250, and each one of the spouses might be $750 each. So all of a sudden now you're at $2,500 for that family, which is what you're
Yeah,
at.
what you're at.
Without being able to save money and build, and have a reserve and those kind of things. But for comparative purposes, I think it's a.
I've
good
only
idea.
been a commissioner for 2 years, but I have not been approached by one single employee that came to me and said, I wish our health plan was better,
Yeah,
or I wish you'd change, I wish
I mean, I think
our
that's a good
insurance was
perk
better.
for working for the county, is our good health plan.
So,
Well, how about, what I'll do then is I will try to get as close to a matching, just fully insured. This is, I'll be honest with you, that's not gonna be a lot of work, because it truly is just a census that we send to them, they give us the plan, and here you go. And we can put that side by side, just so you guys know, hey, you're here, and this is what we're setting aside for funding, here's what we would pay, and it would all go out.
Yeah.
And we would never get any of it back, and this is what it would cost us based off of our enrollment. So that way you just got it.
yeah.
And then, yeah,
So, I got a couple questions for you. So, if we decided, if we continue to have problems hiring younger people or new employees because they're going, well, your starting pay isn't what I can get at McDonald's or whatever, and we say our insurance is better, if we pay them a stipend and say we hire a 20-year-old and we just pay the stipend and he's, let's say 26, that way he's off his parents' insurance, and he shows that he has his own insurance, but then he works for us 10 years and then he goes, you know what, I want to be on you guys' insurance. So do we have to take him? So if they go along while they're young and healthy and then all of a sudden they start having some health issues, then we got to take them.
Yeah, on second thought, I don't know that the stipend is probably the best. I think if you're going to incentivize, you need to incentivize through hiring bonus
Yeah.
versus, because then you get into those sticky situations where, if we got down to it and we just said we absolutely cannot find anybody, you're probably better off saying, okay, we'll give a $2,000 hiring bonus if you come work for us,
Yeah.
based on a certain amount of employment, I don't know. I see that there's several companies in Great Bend that are doing that, sign-on bonuses
Oh,
basically.
yeah. I've got several groups I work with that have gone, manufacturing especially, that have gone to, you work with us for a couple of years and we're guarantee you that we'll pay out, $2,000 a year, or something like that.
Is that what you'd call like a longevity type deal?
Well, this is short-term, this
Yeah,
is
this
more
is just
short-term, because we have longevity, right, already?
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'm talking short-term, like over a year or 2-year period. There's companies that are paying a certain amount to incentivize somebody to come and work for you.
Yeah. So are you calling our longevity, our step increases every year?
No, our longevity, after 5 years, you get an amount each month, and it goes up 5, 10, and 15 years. You get a little bit every month.
Okay.
That's a nice perk. Yep. Okay, so my takeaway for here is that, very simple benchmark that we'll do. So that way you can see how your plan compares to other municipalities in the state. I don't know that we've got in our stuff a lot from just, right around here. Because, you take Martin County, for example, they're on the state plan. And that plan's gonna be completely different than what you have, and they do have a higher out-of-pockets and some of those kind of things, but we'll be able to look at that from a state perspective, not necessarily just right around you here. And then we'll get a Blue Cross and a United Healthcare. Those will be very simple to do.
Okay.
And do you have anything? Anybody
I think
having
so.
no complaints, and prescriptions are running okay so far and everything? Okay. I do have one other thing that I'm going to bring you the next time, and there's a new program that's out that's for higher costing specialty drugs that are out there, and it's an alternative funding. There are manufacturers out there that are, right now, if a plan, you can set up your plan in a way that says, hey, we don't cover specialty drugs. But we've got this program set up that if you are eligible, that you can get your drugs here. And it doesn't go through your plan anymore. But, oh, by the way, if you're not eligible or there isn't an alternative funding available, you can still get it through your plan. Okay? And the reason for that, I've got another group that I work with. They got 4 individuals that are each spending anywhere between $60,000 to $90,000 a year on prescription drugs. And 3 of those 4 individuals were eligible for this other program. They were able to get set up where those prescriptions are coming straight from the manufacturer to that member, no cost to that group whatsoever. So it removed about $200,000 worth of claims on an annual basis for those members. And how it's set up is that they work directly. You give about a 60-day notice that to the members and let them know this is where they go. They start working very quickly. They're able to find out if they're eligible for the plan. And if they're eligible for that, they can get those drugs directly from the manufacturers. Now, it's not something that you need to do right now. We don't have a lot of concern on that. But the bad thing is that there are those million-dollar drugs out there. We got one group in Chanute right now that has a person taking about a drug that's about $60,000 a month.
Yeah.
And and they're looking at, they had not put that in yet, but they're looking at doing that same thing if that drug. Now, not always are the drugs eligible, not always are the members eligible, because sometimes those programs have an income basis for eligibility on them. But if they are eligible and they can get it for free directly from the manufacturer, why run it through your plan, right?
So is that going to cost us a little more to do this, or is this just something that we
How
put
you-
in effect?
Instead of paying that, what the company does that they work with, they charge 30% of the savings. So that $60,000 drug would cost the plan, to just run through the plan as an $18,000 bill that they would charge on an annual basis for that drug to be got out of and they'll control the disbursement and everything of it.
So are they just making their money by getting it direct from the manufacturer?
Setting it up, getting it set up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and saving that way?
Yep, that's exactly.
Because if
what
we're
they're
not funding it, I guess I didn't see how they make that work, but it's just because they're going through the manufacturer.
Yeah, so what they do is that, okay, all of a sudden, that drug is $60,000 coming through the plan right now. Members probably not paying anything for it on their side right now anyways because of copay assistance that's out there. And so right now, but then that bill comes into your plan and you guys pay that $60,000, right? That $5,000 a month. If it comes this way, then what happens is versus you paying that $5,000 every time that member fills it, you're gonna pay $1,500 and they're gonna bill you, not the manufacturer, but the company, the advocacy program will bill you $1,500 versus you paying that $5,000 a month program. Now, those programs sometimes last forever. They can dry up very quickly. But then the thing is, the member can have it through the plan. Now, it is an extra step for the members, and we know that can be difficult at times, but I mean, we're talking real dollars. And people say, well, why do the manufacturers do this? Well, basically, the best answer I've heard, they can stand in front of Congress and they can say, yeah, we made $3 billion last year, but oh, by the way, we gave away $1 billion in charity. And that's why they continue to do it in that regard. Now, they could all of a sudden just flip the switch and say, you know what, we're done doing this type of program from the manufacturer standpoint, but until they do, you can take advantage of it. And I don't think right now that you have very many at all that would be impacted, maybe one.
So when you say it's another step for the employee, I mean,
That advocacy works directly with them to help them get it set up. They've already set it up. Right now they have a step anyway, so every time sometimes once a year, Depending on the drug, you have to go through what's called a prior authorization, which is the doctors working with the insurance just to make sure that everything's okay. And then it's set up for a year's time typically. And then they gotta do that all over again. This would be, if anybody's currently in that position, this program, they would, instead of working with the insurance, they're gonna work with the advocacy program to see if it can work. And if it can't work, then that advocacy works back with the insurance to get it all set up so you're still gonna get it through your normal channels that you got it through before. It doesn't impact them not being able to get the drug. It's just saying, hey, if we can get it for, I don't wanna say free because you're still paying it, but if we can get it on a hugely reduced cost,
Yeah.
we can go this way versus here. And really, it can be from a drug that costs $1,500 a month to a drug that can, like I just talked about, can be $60,000, $70,000. And that's the one I'm more, those $1,500 are expensive. But those $60,000, $70,000 that you don't have on your plan right now, that could happen, those are the ones that these types of programs, if you already have them set up, it could help you tremendously.
So worst case scenario, if we got an employee that's taking one of these $50,000 a month pills and they don't want to bother going through their steps to get qualified or whatever,
Mhm.
what do you do then?
They don't have coverage.
Okay.
They have to go through that, they have to go, I mean, it's set up plain document wise that they have to go through that program first. And that program is also say, okay, you're not eligible to receive it this direction, then they can go back and get it through their normal
Okay,
channels.
so that's the motivation to make sure that they do everything they can to get it, be qualified for it.
It's just a prior authorization type process. The biggest concern that I've ever had from anybody on that program is that we have to make sure that we educate everybody, because working with that advocacy, a lot of times those drugs, the eligibility is based off of income. So they have to share income between the manufacturer and the advocacy, and sometimes some people have a problem with sharing that income. That's the biggest thing that I've ever ran into. Now, and a lot of times, once you have a conversation, they have that conversation with the person, they're like, okay, I get it. You know, it's helping to try to keep costs down so we can give you these good benefits, we can keep your premiums down, employee premiums down, and most people get that.
But if they refuse to show their income, then they're responsible for whatever their medication goes. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. But I can bring you back an analysis, and that's what I was going to do. Bring you, at next time we meet, bring you an analysis on that. If you currently have anybody how that would impact the plan, and then anything else that we would need to do with the program, so.
Okay.
But
I mean, it looks to me like that's the deal where you want to get it going now, so that when you start getting that $50,000 a month medication bill, you're already set up.
it's the exact same thing, if you remember a few years ago, we did that with dialysis. We set up a program about 5 years ago for dialysis, that if you ever got somebody that was in that position, that it could have a big impact on the plan. Well, we had that situation just happen in the last year. Now, unfortunately, before that kicked in, you know, it's not on the plan, the situation is not on the plan anymore. But if it would have been for another 6 months, then, or actually 8 months, I think it was, then it would have reverted, and Medicare would have been primary, and you
Yeah,
guys
I
wouldn't
remember
have.
talking about that.
Yeah.
And so we have, now, it didn't come in to definitely help you, but it could have
Yeah.
helped you tremendously in
Yeah.
that situation. So this would be the exact same thing. It could protect you as long as those subsidies are, not subsidies isn't the right word, but the manufacturer programs are still out there. It can absolutely help you in a lot of situations. So that would be the only thing I would suggest that we look at from your current plan right now, except for maybe the benchmarking if you want to make any changes to deductibles and stuff like that, if you would decide to, but, okay?
Alrighty,
All right,
thanks
took
for,
too much of your time this morning as is, and I appreciate it, and
Yeah.
we'll see you here in a couple months.
okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
See you later.
Good morning.
Morning.
What's everybody doing today?
All right.
Good. Okay, so here's the list of checks that haven't been cashed since 2020. So I just need a permission from you guys to go and void those so we can clean up all those items not in bank.
$111.
Oh, I
Don't
know.
make fun of them, one of them might be my
Yeah.
check.
Can we get a name?
Right
Can we
around
get
in
the
your
name?
pickup first. No.
Yes, I do have
You don't wanna
one.
void your own check, it's sitting in your pile on your desk.
Yeah, it's probably on the dash that's bleached out so bad you can't read it now.
You're not here, Ty, you're fine.
Good.
When we cancel these, we basically put a stop on it, or does it cost us to put a stop on these
No,
checks?
the bank should not charge us. St. John National does not charge us. Equity, I think, might.
I was gonna say, if we're putting a stop on a $14 check and it costs $30 to
Yeah.
do it, there's no benefit, other than clearing it from our books, I guess.
Yeah.
Eventually we want
Since
to.
we're a county, a government entity, we shouldn't be charged, but I don't know how to argue that with equity.
Well, but don't most checks say if not cashed within a year?
These
They're
ones
void?
don't, that's what I've been doing from now, I've been stamping them with void 30 days. And hopefully we don't get these anymore, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
but these ones have been sitting there for a long time, so.
but how
So-
do you keep track of that then?
Well, you have to, I don't know that that's really, okay, say these small checks, you hate to do it, but on my side, in AP and payroll, I always put a stop payment on it because I have had people with those checks stamped, or even not stamped, but they'll try to run them through the bank 2 years after the fact. So it's always good to have that stop payment at the bank to hopefully keep that from happening. You know, you can void a check and reissue, well, say they find the old check, take the old check into the, and then you're really screwed up.
Cash
So
it
yeah,
twice.
you want to, yes, have a stop payment on it.
Mhm. So she needs a motion to avoid these. I make a motion that we give permission to the county to void the checks and transfer the funds back into county general to keep motor vehicle tag and current tax funds in balance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
That's all I have for
Pretty
today, yes. Guys have any questions?
How's everything going?
Going good.
Hire anybody yet?
I have some people picking applications yesterday, I'm having an interview next week, but
Okay.
I don't know, I'm not, my hopes are not very high right now, so.
Okay.
We'll keep looking. So,
Good.
I was reading through Melissa's, notes from the audit, and I think, she wasn't happy with all the people in the office don't doing, you know, their
For the
reconciliation and
Cross
stuff.
training.
So I talked to Karen, and she's fine with learning that side, so we can alternate 1 month and 1 month, and
Mhm.
we'll see how that works, and try to keep them happy,
Okay,
so.
that'll work, thank you.
Well, have a good day.
You too.
See ya.
Mike would like about 5 minutes of your time.
Do you have anything else after that?
I don't.
Let me see, real quick. Oh, Luann went ahead, I was just gonna let you guys know, she's kind of ramrodded this since I'm so busy. She contacted Capers, and they will send a couple people out on September 8th. And they will do, starting at like 2 o'clock, they'll do one-on-one appointments with people if an employee is interested in coming in and going over their particular account. And then at 4 o'clock, they'll give a 45-minute presentation to anybody that can be there. And then following that, they'll continue with the one-on-one appointments. So we basically kind of set it up for our employees and like spouses of our employees. So if Lori was interested.
Okay, and you said that was September 8th?
Yeah, and I'll send more information on this to you guys, September 8th, but they would like people, they'd like a list of people that would want to come so they can bring their account information with them.
Okay.
So, Luann's gonna kind of handle that for me, but I wanted to let you guys know that we would get something set up on that.
Okay.
It's a Thursday.
Yes.
Nothing else?
Phil sent this, He's got a quote on tractors, and even if we ordered something now, it'd probably be March or so before we would see anything. So he's suggesting if we want to do anything, we need to move on it within the next couple weeks. He had a meeting he had to go to.
Let's give it 70 for trades.
Yeah.
That means the price just went up.
Yeah. So, yeah, how many? And we'd be able to use our tractors until we got the new ones in?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Let's wait and talk to Phil about it next week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll put
You
him
good?
on.
might get a bid on a red tractor
Okay, I think I'm done
with a
with
trade-in
you.
being the same.
I do have a printout, I guess, of that meeting you guys went to. Is that what, that's printout they sent me about?
Go back to counseling.
Yeah.
The meeting we had.
So if you guys
Oh.
want other copies of that, or you
I was
wanna
like,
look
what?
through that.
Do we need to set the budget before you can get it turned in?
Yes, it's, you know what? I had all that sitting on my desk. You have no other changes, do you? Except for what we talked about last week? I gave her all that information, she went through it all, put all that in, sent me new information on it, and we're pretty much ready to roll if you have nothing
On that
else.
counseling, what have we been paying them, 6 or 9,000?
9,000.
And we're,
It was 9, did you wanna go back to the 7? I thought you wanted to go back to the 7.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
The 7?
it's fine.
Okay, so I
Seven's
think that's what we
last
did.
year.
I think
Unless
we
they
went back to
improve
the
their
7.
services and
Yeah.
Yeah.
see
And
whether.
then see next year.
How hard is it to do 10 Zoom meetings in a year?
Well, exactly.
You know, I'm assuming that their whole deal is basically state and federal funded, isn't it?
Did you?
So of course, we are going over the R&R. So our county hearing is set for September 12th.
How many
And we'll-
townships are going over R&R? I haven't
I
paid close
don't,
attention in
let's
the
see,
paper.
all of the 12 or 13 townships that Bill Thomas does, no, they did not.
That's just because valuation's way up, right?
Well, he pretty much keeps them, they always stay
Yeah.
down low. Let me think, the ones that Melissa sent me, I should have brought that sheet. I have that all sprawled out all over my desk. A handful maybe. But our hearing, we'll do our R&R hearing at 8:30, and then we'll follow with our budget hearing, and we have that set up for, I believe that is the 12th. Let me look at my,
August,
September.
September 12th?
We're doing the latest date that we can, so we can get everybody's budgets in and be set to
Okay.
go for that. But yeah, I will make sure to make copies and set all that aside and bring that to you guys next week so you can.
But basically, the only increases we had on the budget was the fire department. And that's because we gotta replace some expiring equipment, road and bridge. And that's because Phil took a big cut 2 years ago when the oil price was
Yeah.
down.
We have some in county general with Lisa,
Yeah. County general, and then with the ambulance.
yeah,
I mean, it's not like we're making extravagant, I mean, we had to spend
No.
more money, but everybody does.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't wanna start going backwards and then
Exactly.
end up with a big problem.
Exactly.
No.
How long would you like, Mike?
Just a couple minutes.
I make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss attorney-client privilege for 5 minutes, and then we will adjourn with no action after.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.